With the official trailer releasing for Grief mode in Call of Duty Black Ops 6 Zombies, I thought it would be fun to go over all of the positives and negatives of what they've told us about Grief mode so far. There's a lot of things I'm very excited for, but also some things I'm a bit more skeptical of. Of course, the mode is not out yet, so this is not judging the mode itself. It's more so just talking about what I'm really excited for, but also the things that I'm more skeptical of and a little bit worried of. Starting off with the positives, the number one biggest thing is the fact that this is actually a permanent mode. It is not a limited time mode. Now, to be honest, this is something that I think is kind of just like the bare minimum. I think every game mode should be permanent. I don't understand the point of making any zombies game mode as an LTM unless it's like a very heavy collab-centric LTM like the red light, green light mode. And if it kind of sucks anyways, then I guess I don't really care if they get rid of it. But there's a lot of modes that they've added throughout the life cycle of this game so far, like Cranked, for example, where I see no issue with that mode just staying in the game for the long term. But they always end up taking these modes out, and I'm very thankful that Grief is not going to be one of these modes. It is being marketed as a brand new official mode that you can play in this game 24/7, which likely means it's going to come to Black Ops 7 on launch, which I really hope is the case. I do not want them to not have it in Black Ops 7 at launch and then give it to us throughout some DLC season in like season 3 or 4 or something like that. I think that would be kind of frustrating. If it's already here now in Black Ops 6, it should be at Black Ops 7 right away. But I'm just happy they're treating Grief like an actual full-on side mode rather than just a little LTM thing that they're just going to throw in just for fun for a little bit. That is a good thing, and I'm overall happy with that. I'm also happy that it's a 4v4 mode. I was kind of worried that they were going to do some 2v2 thing, or they were going to have to restrict it in some way, shape, or form because maybe they weren't able to get 8 players to be playable on a map at once. Thankfully, that is not the case. They are giving us the 4v4 experience that Grief is known for. I'm also extremely happy that it's available on all maps. I was a little worried at first that it was only going to be available on Shattered Vale and Liberty Falls because when they first marketed it, it was only shown on those maps. But then, of course, when the blog post released, they officially announced that it's going to be on all maps. And what's even better is that each map has multiple different Grief arenas that you'll be able to play on. So the play space is not the entire map at one time, rather it's a cut out area of the map, which is how the original Grief played. And it makes sense why they want to do this because the way Grief is meant to work, it's supposed to be a very chaotic experience where you are constantly interacting with the other team. They don't want to have some sort of situation where each team is camping on a completely separate side of the map. So by doing these separate little Grief arenas, you're more likely to interact with the other team more often. And there are a lot of playable maps here. There's going to be 11 total Grief arenas available on day 1. Liberty Falls is going to have 2 arenas. One of the arenas is over by the gas station area, which is like, of course, the spawn area. And then there's a second arena, which is towards the church and the cemetery. Terminus will have 2 arenas. One of them is at the Biolab area, and the other one is on Crab Island. Citadel de Mor will only have 1 arena, which is the courtyard area, as well as the entrance hall to the castle. That seems to be a pretty big arena, to be honest, probably one of the bigger ones out of any of these arenas. The Tomb has 2 arenas. One of them is the dig site area, which of course is the spawn room, as well as a couple of the areas next to it. And then, of course, also the Dark Ether Nexus is another arena, which is going to be really, really interesting. Shattered Vale has a total of 4 arenas. One of them is by the garden pond. The second one is by the upper terrace area. The third arena is in the mansion itself, in the front of the mansion, and the fourth arena is towards the back side of the mansion where Double Tap is. This is something that is by far a massive improvement over Grief from Black Ops 2, because in Black Ops 2, there were a couple of maps you can play Grief on, but not nearly as much as this. You had Cell Block from Mob of the Dead. You had a little section of Buried that you can play on Grief, and then you could also play on Town and Farm, and that was literally it. There was only 4 Grief maps available in that game, and there could have been more. They definitely could have given us a little section of Origins, they could have given us a section of Die Rise, but they just decided not to. There really wasn't nearly as many playable maps. I still love Grief from Black Ops 2, but you just didn't have that many options. Cell Block Grief from Mob of the Dead was by far the best map, though. I think we can all agree on that. Another really cool thing about Grief in Black Ops 6 is that there will be indirect PvP combat. Of course, you can't actually kill other players, but just like in the original Grief, there are still ways to either slow players down or make it so they end up dying in some way, shape, or form. For example, you can actually throw shock charges at them to stun them, which is kind of insane. I'm sure a lot of different pieces of equipment could stun the other players. You could also just shoot them to stun them. You could melee them to stun them. You can body block them if you kind of like go in front of them in a narrow hallway and there's zombies on the other side, then they're probably going to end up dying. And there's also ways to grief them in terms of the objectives. So for those of you who don't know, they have introduced this new objective feature to grief where you will actually have the opportunity to compete with various challenges against the other team, and whoever loses the challenge ends up getting a massive debuff to themselves. There's a couple different types of debuffs here. There's a weapon nerf, which will make your weapon weaker. There's an ammo drain, which definitely sounds like it'll be frustrating. There's zombie ambush, which will, I'm assuming, spawn a bunch of zombies on those enemy players. There's the weapon carousel, which sounds really fun, where it makes it so your weapons are randomly swapped every few seconds. I actually kind of want to have that happen to me because I think that would be really interesting and fun. But of course, it is technically a debuff because it is going to make it a bit harder for you to stay alive. And then there's also frozen, which makes it so your movement is heavily slowed down, and this is obviously going to cause you to most likely die, especially on the later rounds. These debuffs are a really interesting system because I've said before that I think with the mechanics nowadays, especially compared to Black Ops 2, there's just not going to be nearly as many ways for players to actually go down and die. I think people are going to be staying alive for a lot longer, but because of these debuffs, I actually think that's not going to be a big problem because, I mean, if you're slowed down in Black Ops 6, that is definitely going to cause you to die, especially when you're past a certain round. Unless you have, a really overpowered weapon on you and you're really good at the game, you're probably going to go down. So I definitely think this is going to implement an interesting challenge to the game, and I think objectives could be kind of fun. They're not necessarily forced on the player, it's just more so if you want to make sure you're not getting these debuffs on yourself, you're probably going to want to participate in them, and I do think that is an interesting thing to add to grief mode. I'm also very happy that they are bringing back the concept of taking smaller sections of existing maps to make them into separate experiences, which is something that they did in Black Ops 2 with a lot of their maps quite frequently, as I mentioned before. And I like that they're bringing this back because it opens up a lot of possibilities for the future, and in my opinion, it should be their way of giving casual fans something to enjoy while still making the main maps very complex. They are literally adding 11 different arenas to this game. Couldn't those 11 arenas be their own separate survival maps? They honestly could be. They could just kind of like throw in the Wonder Fizz, throw in a Pack-a-Punch machine, as there already will be with these grief mode versions of these maps. Imagine being able to play those in separate survival modes. There would be no need to make the actual core versions of these maps to be simplified whatsoever for the casual fan base if you already have this separate way of playing it available. And this could be great for the future of zombies, for Black Ops 7, for Black Ops 8, and whatever they do next. If they want to make the main maps more complex, they want to make them more difficult, they don't want to have all these hand-holdy elements that zombies tends to have nowadays, they could do that, and then they could just also give us these separate survival maps that casuals can play if they really don't want to deal with anything complicated in zombies. And of course, if they want to do the Easter egg, well, directed mode is there. So there's really no excuse, there's no reason for why the main modes need to be simplified in any way, shape, or form if these options are going to be available for the player. And overall, I'm just glad that Black Ops 6 is at least opening up the opportunity to possibly do that in the future. But now let's get into the negatives, and the first big negative, probably my biggest negative for this mode, is the fact that Gobblegums are allowed at all. Now, there are a couple Gobblegums that they have restricted, which is obviously a good thing, but to be honest, they didn't restrict it nearly enough. They only restricted Exit Strategy, Idolize, Wonder Bar, Timeout, and Flavor Hex. They didn't restrict stuff like Perkaholic or Hidden Power, which in my opinion, those are probably even more powerful than some of those other Gobblegums mentioned there. Obviously, the Gobblegums they restricted there seem to be restricted because they kind of break what grief is. Like, obviously Exit Strategy makes no sense in grief mode, so that's understandable, but Perkaholic and Hidden Power are still going to be really overpowered and will really help out players a ton, to the point where it's going to make matches quite unfair, especially in public matches when you have no control over whether or not all players are going to abide by the same rules. Obviously, if you're playing with friends, you can just be like, okay, we're just not going to use Gobblegums this match. But the second you play online, everyone's going to be popping Perkaholics, Hidden Powers, and all the most overpowered Gobblegums in the game to make it so the game is just not balanced at all. And personally, I think balance is pretty important when you're going for a competitive PvP mode. But the thing is, what else are they going to do? Because I don't think Activision would allow Treyarch to ship out a brand new Zombies mode that didn't allow you to use any Gobblegums whatsoever, because obviously Gobblegums is a big part part of how they make money in zombies, obviously, with people buying Gobblegums through the shop. So what are they going to do? Well, I do think they need to at least restrict a couple more. Treyarch thankfully did come out and say that they might make additional restrictions in the future if, you know, there's certain ones that just seem to be a bit overpowered, but I feel like something like Perkaholic is kind of a no-brainer to restrict, but unfortunately, I just feel like they might leave a couple of those in just because they need to have some of the really ultra rare ones in order to motivate players to actually use them, so then they're more likely to buy more in the future when they start running out of them. And I really just don't want Grief Mode to become a mode that's all about just using as many Gobblegums as possible, and that's basically how you end up winning. That just wouldn't be fun. Like, of course, I know you can earn Gobblegums for free just by playing in this game, but I mean, I'm Prestige 8, and I honestly don't even have that many Gobblegums in the game, and I barely use Gobblegums myself, so clearly, I don't think that it's going to be fair for everyone, especially for players who maybe don't play as much. And I just don't want a situation like that where the competitive aspect of this mode just isn't really there and it just feels so heavily unbalanced. Another thing I'm not really happy about is the fact that score streaks are allowed, and this has nothing to do with the business side of the game whatsoever. If they restricted score streaks, it obviously wouldn't harm their ability to make money from Gobblegums, so they definitely could remove stuff like the mute injection from Grief Mode completely, and it wouldn't affect any of that. I think it would just help the balance overall, because obviously mute injections is going to be the main strategy in this mode. It's going to be how fast can you get mute injection and making sure you are using them at the right time, you know, maybe like cycling between them throughout your team. I just don't think that's going to be a fun meta, to be honest, with this mode. So I would love to see that be restricted as a thing that's just not available, or maybe it's exclusive to dropping from special enemies. So every now and then a player can get a mute injection, but you can't just keep going to the crafting bench and just getting more mute injections whenever you get enough salvage, which, if we're going to be honest, getting salvage is not the hardest thing in the world in this game. It is something that you can do effectively if you are saving your salvage properly. I know they are making it a bit harder to get salvage in this mode, it seems like, so maybe it will be balanced in that sense if players are like only able to get a mute injection like every 5 to 10 rounds or something like that, then perhaps it can work. And I'm definitely going to wait to judge on that fully, but in general, I just think it would not have hurt the game whatsoever if they just didn't allow mute injections. You can keep the other score streaks, you can keep most of them, I don't really care, but stuff like mute injection should probably be restricted in this game mode. This next thing is something that originally I thought was a positive, but the more I've thought about it, I definitely think they should find a way to implement this into the mode some way, shape, or form, and this is the fact that wonder weapons are restricted in this mode. You are not able to get any wonder weapons in Grief Mode in Black Ops 6. Now, in general, I first thought that was a positive because I definitely don't want this game to be too easy. I've said that multiple times before, so if you were allowed to have wonder weapons on any map, you could just get them out of the mystery box and use them, it would obviously be too easy. I mean, imagine people just sitting in the corner on the tomb with the ice staff. They would pretty much never die, at least until like, you know, round 50 plus, and that's just not a fun way to make Grief Mode actually work. But what they should do, and what they definitely could do, is find a different way to implement the map-specific wonder weapons onto their respective maps. And in my opinion, the best way to do that is with power-ups. There should be wonder weapon power-ups in this mode that every now and then drops, and when you pick it up, it will give you a random wonder weapon from that map. But it will only give you that wonder weapon for a limited amount of time, maybe like 60 seconds in total, or perhaps it will be until you run out of ammo of it. So of course, if you're using a wonder weapon like the ray gun, maybe there's only 40 shots in it and you get 40 shots. Once you finish all 40 shots of that ray gun, it goes away and you cannot use it again until you get another power up that has another wonder weapon. I think that would be a fun way just to make the gameplay even more chaotic. It wouldn't be breaking the balance of the mode. It would just be something that when you see the wonder weapon power up drop, everyone on the map is going to rush for it because obviously they're going to want that wonder weapon. And I think that could be pretty fun, but unfortunately, as it is currently, there is no way of getting wonder weapons in this mode. But definitely, I do not want to see them throw in the wonder weapons in the mystery box as weapons you can just normally use. That would be pretty terrible in a Grief mode. This next thing is a heavy nitpick. It's really not the end of the world, but I don't like the fact that all door buys are open. Of course, these are pretty small arenas, so there's already not going to be a lot of like available doors anyways, but I just wish that they left those doors there because it just adds an extra thing that you get to purchase in the mode itself. And I like that element of cell block Grief. It was actually pretty fun how players would be like refusing to buy the door because obviously you're not going to want to buy the door instead of the other team buying the door. So people are just kind of like sitting there waiting, and then eventually somebody does it. Like, I kind of liked that element of Grief, and I think that could have been fun here, even if there's only like 1 or 2 door buys on each arena. Some of the arenas, like I said, might not even have any doors at all. For example, the Terminus Crab Island map, that obviously wouldn't have any door buys, but some of the other ones, like some of the Liberty Falls areas, probably would have a door buy or 2. And I think that could be interesting, especially if the teams are split up between a door buy. I think that could be kind of fun, but they kind of just said, no, we're just going to have all door buys open. You don't have to buy any doors. So it's not the end of the world. I just think it could have been a little bit interesting if they change it up a little bit. And the last thing I'm going to mention that's going to kind of sound like a broken record at this point, but I just don't like a lot of the modern zombies mechanics. And I do think overall, this would probably end up being more fun without stuff like the loadout system, without how armor works in these games. The classic point system obviously would be really fun to have in Grief mode, but of course we're not going to have that. We're going to have the new point system. Kind of sounds like a broken record, I know, but I just wanted to point that out as the final negative, or concern, I guess is a better way to put it, because of course we have not played Grief mode yet in this game, so we don't know how it's going to play, but I'm still so excited for it. I cannot wait to try it out. I'm so happy they finally decided to bring us Grief mode back into Call of Duty Zombies. It's been just way too long without it. Hopefully it's fun, and hopefully down the line they'll give us even more PvP modes. I really would love to see a mode someday that's a full-on PvP mode where you could literally kill other players, kind of like the Zombie Blood Rush mode from Black Ops 3's custom mod tools, which I know I mentioned that mode almost every other video, but I need to keep mentioning it because so many people don't even know about it and they don't know how much fun it is. So that's going to do it for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. I will see you on my next one. Peace out.